Coleman, how much of your work, you mentioned that you were doing the instructor training. How much of that work was in helping people prepare physiologically for stress, as opposed to like, you're going to be badass athletes, tactical athletes. We're going to train you within an inch of your life. But when you started that, let's say, because I know that there's an interesting evolution in that phase, which is where Mission Critical Teams initiative has been so cool to help that evolution. When you started as a training instructor, how much of it was about just becoming very good athletes versus physiologically handling stress?
100% to 0%. 15 years ago as a basic training instructor, 12 years ago in advanced training, Patty, we did not talk about this hardly at all. So 100% of the training was about your, for lack of a better term, and bear with me, your mental proficiency and mental toughness, the route to it, and maybe the route to it still was 100% physical. Like the more you could grind and the more you could deliver in the event, it was that being able to deliver in that event. There is some value in just straight up physically taking that pathway was almost like the signal that you had mental agility or mental toughness or mental proficiency.
It was a war of attrition for you either survived or you didn't, and that was that.
That's it. And the best example, Patty, is like just go to basic training, right? You come in, at least into our training, wrestlers, swimmers, and water polo players are the highest percentage of graduates in SEAL training. I can give you 5 obvious reasons, right? Over time, they built up the comfort, but they weren't trained in some mental agility. It was like the sport, just like they built up that proficiency. So since probably 2009, 2010 to now, and I'm obviously not on active duty anymore, our relationship with mental agility and mental fitness has come a long way. It wasn't even in our curriculum.
And so how did that, you said it's gone from 0 to now it's incorporated it, but it's still physical and rightfully so. At what point did you notice it, either a need for it to change? And then when you actually have tangibly can say that's the point when it started to shift?
Yeah. I'm going to take a stab at when it started to shift, but I'll say right around when I was getting out, 2011 or 12, where our selection and assessment psychologist, that department started to grow with folks like you and C. So like people who were professionals in mental agility and mental training. That wasn't just a selection and assessment or an off-ramping transition type psychology department, right? Or a checkup from the neck up. So around, just let's call it 2012, I personally got interested, and it's why I'm always nerding out on these topics with you guys, is because in 2008, I think, or 2007, I picked up John Rady's book, Spark, which wasn't even about mental performance, right? It was about the brain really learning and the physiology connection to the brain. Right. It's the first time I ever...
And his work was a lot about children and learning at school, right? It was had nothing to do with the Navy SEALs on the surface.
The opening story is about the school in Naperville, Illinois, and learning and the science and technology scores of the kids because they were running a mile every morning to anaerobic threshold, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, as you know, Patty, chapter by chapter to talk about brain-derived neurotropic factor, the hypothalamic pituitary axis. And I had gotten a small taste of it when I read Dave Grossman's book on combat. And I admit this all the time in the open. I went through Buzz in 1999. I had already had 2 or 3 combat tours under my belt by 2007. And Spark and On Combat, those 2 books, handed to me by a peer, were the first 2 like legitimate pieces of mental agility training I got, other than go harder for longer with more intensity. That was my mental training from the time I was a little kid. Now, it works, but it works until it doesn't, right? So then the shit hits the fan, or you just run out of energy for it, or you have some sort of adrenal burnout, and then you're toast and you don't even know what the hell happened to you.